You know, there are moments in life that change everything. Moments that split your existence into before and after. I never thought mine would happen in front of my childhood dining room table, with my father's voice echoing off the same walls where he used to read me bedtime stories. But sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. And sometimes we have to make choices that feel like they're tearing our hearts in half. I'm 32 now, and I've built what most people would call a successful life. I run a tech consulting firm that I started from nothing, literally from my studio apartment with a secondhand laptop and dreams bigger than my bank account. 7 years later, I have offices in 3 cities, 43 employees, and clients who trust me with millions of dollars in projects. But success, I've learned, doesn't shield you from family drama. If anything, it makes it more complicated. My father, Robert, never really understood what I do for a living. To him, real work involves getting your hands dirty, punching a time clock, and earning an honest paycheck from someone else. He spent 37 years at the same manufacturing plant, working his way up from the floor to supervisor, and he was proud of that journey. He should be proud of it. But somewhere along the way, his pride in his own path became judgment of mine. The tension had been building for months. Every family gathering became a minefield of passive-aggressive comments about my fancy lifestyle and questions about when I was going to get a real job. He'd make jokes about my work clothes, saying I looked like I was playing dress-up. He'd comment on my car, asking if I really needed something so expensive. Every success I shared was met with skepticism, as if my achievements were somehow less valid because they didn't fit his definition of hard work. My mother, Susan, would always try to smooth things over. "Your father's just worried about you," she'd say. "He doesn't understand your world, but he's proud of you." I wanted to believe her, but the evidence suggested otherwise. The proud father I remembered from my childhood seemed to have been replaced by someone who saw my success as a personal affront to his values. Things came to a head last month. My parents had invited my aunt and uncle, my father's brother and his wife, over for Sunday dinner. This was a tradition in our family, these big Sunday meals where everyone would gather around the table that my grandfather had built with his own hands. I'd been looking forward to it because I hadn't seen my Uncle Dave in months, and I'd always had a good relationship with him. I should have known something was wrong when I walked in and saw the look on my father's face. He had that expression he used to get when I was a kid and had done something that disappointed him. Tight-lipped, eyes slightly narrowed, jaw set in a way that meant trouble was coming. But I pushed down that familiar knot of anxiety and tried to focus on the good parts of being home. Dinner started normally enough. My mother had made her famous pot roast, the one that had been winning over guests for as long as I could remember. The conversation flowed easily between family updates, neighborhood gossip, and my uncle's stories from his job at the post office. I was actually starting to relax when my uncle asked me about work. "So tell me about this business of yours," he said, cutting into his roast. "Susan tells me you're doing really well." I lit up the way I always do when someone genuinely wants to hear about my company. "Yeah, we just landed this amazing contract with a hospital system. We're helping them upgrade their entire patient management system. It's the kind of project that could save thousands of hours of administrative work and potentially save lives by reducing errors." My uncle nodded, clearly impressed. "That sounds incredible. How many people are working on something like that?" "We have a team of 12 dedicated to this project alone," I said. "But across all our projects, we're up to 43 employees now. It's been amazing to watch the company grow." That's when I felt it, that familiar chill that always preceded one of my father's outbursts. I glanced over at him and saw his knuckles were white where he was gripping his fork. 43 employees, he repeated, his voice flat. "And what exactly do all these people do all day?" I tried to keep my tone light, hoping to diffuse whatever was building. "Well, we have developers who write the code, project managers who coordinate everything, quality assurance specialists who test the systems, client relations people who—" "So you're telling me," he interrupted, his voice getting louder, "that you have 43 people sitting around computers all day, and somehow this is more valuable than actual work?" The room went quiet. My mother shot him a warning look, but he was already past the point of listening to reason. My aunt and uncle exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. "Dad," I said carefully, "it is actual work. We're solving real problems for real people. The hospital system I mentioned? Our work is going to help doctors access patient information faster, which means you're getting paid ridiculous amounts of money to do something that people used to do just fine with paper and filing cabinets, he snapped. You know what I was doing when I was your age? I was supporting a family, working 60-hour weeks, earning every dollar with sweat and sacrifice. I wasn't sitting in some air-conditioned office pretending that typing on a computer was the same as real work. I felt my chest tighten. This was the conversation I'd been dreading for years, the one where all his resentment would finally spill out. But I wasn't prepared for how much it would hurt, especially with my aunt and uncle sitting there, watching our family drama unfold. I work plenty hard, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I put in 70-hour weeks. I've built this company from nothing. I employ people, I pay taxes, I contribute to the economy. I don't understand why you can't see that as legitimate work. His face was getting red now, the way it used to when I was a teenager and we'd fight about my grades or my friends or my plans for the future. Because it's not real, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table hard enough to make the dishes rattle. You're living in some fantasy world where moving money around on computers counts as contributing to society. You want to know what real work is? Real work is building something with your hands. Real work is showing up even when you're sick because people are counting on you. Real work is earning a paycheck from someone who actually produces something valuable. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face had gone pale, and she was staring at her plate like she wished she could disappear. My aunt and uncle looked mortified, clearly regretting their decision to ask about my work. And I sat there, feeling like I was 16 again, small and ashamed, and wondering why my own father couldn't be proud of me. But then something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the years of therapy I'd done to work through my childhood issues. Maybe it was the confidence I'd built from successfully running a business. Maybe it was just the fact that I was tired of being made to feel ashamed of my success. Whatever it was, I felt my spine straighten and my voice grow steady. You know what, Dad? I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm done apologizing for my success. I'm done letting you make me feel guilty for building something meaningful. You want to know what real work is? Real work is taking responsibility for other people's livelihoods. Real work is making decisions that affect dozens of families. Real work is staying up all night to fix a critical system that hospitals depend on to save lives. Real work is building something from scratch and watching it grow into something that matters. His face was getting redder, and I could see the vein in his forehead that always appeared when he was about to explode. Don't you dare lecture me about responsibility, he said, his voice dangerously low. I was working and supporting a family while you were still in diapers. I sacrificed everything to give you the opportunities you've had, and this is how you repay me? By acting like you're better than the work that put food on your table? I never said I was better than anything, I replied, my voice getting stronger. I said I was proud of what I've built. I said I work hard. I said I contribute to society. If you can't see that, if you can't be proud of your own child's success, then maybe the problem isn't with my work. Maybe the problem is with you. That's when he lost it completely. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor, and he pointed at me with a shaking finger. You ungrateful little, he started, but then he seemed to remember we had guests. He took a deep breath and tried to compose himself, but his voice was still shaking with rage when he continued. You know what? You're right. Maybe the problem is with me. Maybe I was too easy on you. Maybe I should have taught you some respect instead of letting you think you were special. He turned to my aunt and uncle, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This is what I get, he said, his voice bitter. 32 years of raising a child, paying for their education, supporting their dreams, and this is what I get in return. A child who thinks they're too good for the family that raised them. My Uncle Dave, bless him, tried to intervene. Bob, maybe we should... No, my father interrupted. They need to hear this. They need to understand what kind of person they raised. Someone who thinks they're better than everyone else because they lucked into some easy money. That's when I stood up. I was done being lectured, done being humiliated, done being made to feel ashamed of my accomplishments. Easy money? I said, my voice rising. You think this was easy? You think I just stumbled into success? I worked 3 jobs to pay for college because you couldn't afford to help me. I lived on ramen noodles and hope for 2 years while I built my company. I mortgaged my future, risked everything, failed and failed and failed until I figured out how to succeed. And now you want to diminish all of that because it doesn't fit your narrow definition of what counts as work? You're damn right it doesn't count, he shot back, and now he was yelling again, his voice echoing off the walls. You want to know what I think? I think you're a spoiled brat who got lucky and now thinks they're some kind of genius. I think you've forgotten where you came from and who sacrificed to get you where you are. I think you need to remember that without me, without this family, you'd be nothing. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt tears start to form in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of everyone, not when he was already making me feel small enough. I looked around the table at my mother, who was crying quietly into her napkin, at my aunt and uncle, who looked like they wanted to crawl under the table and disappear, and finally back at my father, who was standing there with his chest heaving, waiting for me to back down the way I always had when I was young. But I wasn't young anymore. I wasn't the scared kid who used to hide in his room when his parents fought. I wasn't the insecure teenager who measured his worth by his father's approval. I was a successful adult who had built something meaningful, and I was done letting anyone, even my own father, tell me otherwise. You know what? I said, my voice deadly calm. You're right about one thing. I do need to remember where I came from. I came from a family where love was conditional, where success was only valid if it looked like what you expected, where a child's accomplishments were seen as a threat instead of a celebration. I came from a house where I learned that no matter how hard I worked, no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough for you. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair and started to head for the door, but then I turned back. And you know what else? You're wrong about everything else. I'm not nothing without you. I'm not spoiled, I'm not lucky, and I'm not ungrateful. I'm a person who worked hard to build something meaningful, and I'm proud of that. I'm sorry you can't be proud of it too. I was halfway to the door when he started yelling again. Don't you walk away from me, he shouted. Don't you dare walk away from this family. You think you're so successful, so independent? You think you don't need us? Well, let me tell you something, you arrogant little... That's when the front door opened and 2 of my security team members walked in. I should probably explain about the security. It's not something I like to talk about because it makes me sound paranoid or self-important, but when you run a company that handles sensitive data for major corporations and government agencies, you occasionally make enemies. We've had competitors try to steal our intellectual property, disgruntled clients who blamed us for their own failures, and even some threats from groups who oppose the technological changes we help implement. It's rare, but it happens often enough that my insurance company requires me to have personal protection when I'm in certain situations. I'd been receiving some concerning messages lately from someone who seemed to know a lot about my personal life and my family. Nothing overtly threatening, but enough to make my security team nervous. They'd been doing periodic check-ins, and when they tried to reach me and I didn't answer my phone, they'd traced my location and come to check on me. Marcus and James are both former military, professional, and discreet. They're trained to assess situations quickly and respond appropriately. When they walked through the door and saw my father standing there, red-faced and shouting, with me clearly distressed, they immediately went into protective mode. Is everything all right, sir? Marcus asked, his voice calm but his posture alert. The room went completely silent. My father's mouth was still open from whatever he'd been about to say, but no words came out. My mother's hand was pressed to her chest, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. My aunt and uncle sat frozen, probably wondering if they'd stumbled into some kind of crime scene. Everything's fine, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Just a family discussion that got a little heated. James nodded, but his eyes were scanning the room, taking in the overturned chair, the dishes scattered on the table, the tension that was practically crackling in the air. We tried to reach you on your phone, he said. When you didn't answer, we were concerned. I pulled out my phone and realized I'd put it on silent during dinner. There were 6 missed calls and a series of increasingly concerned text messages. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't realize you were trying to reach me. Who are these people? My father asked, his voice smaller now but still carrying an edge of anger. They're my security team, I said simply. Your what? My mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I have a security team, I explained, feeling suddenly exhausted. It's a requirement for my insurance, given the nature of my work. They were checking on me. My father was staring at Marcus and James like they were aliens who had just landed in his living room. These were clearly not the kind of people he was used to dealing with. Both men were tall, professionally dressed, and had the kind of bearing that comes from military training. They weren't threatening, but they were undeniably formidable. Sir, Marcus said, addressing my father directly, we're going to need you to step back and lower your voice. This is my house, my father said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Yes, sir, we understand that, James replied politely. But our job is to ensure this gentleman's safety, and we need to assess the situation. I watched my father's face as the implications sank in. The successful child he'd been calling spoiled and lucky had a security team. The fake work he'd been dismissing was important enough that people had threatened me over it. The son he'd been trying to diminish was significant enough that professionals were paid to protect him. I think I should go, I said, breaking the silence. This wasn't how I wanted the evening to end. My mother started to cry harder. Please don't leave like this, she said. We can work this out. We're family. I looked at her, and my heart broke a little more. She was caught in the middle of this, torn between her husband and her child, trying to hold together a family that was fracturing right in front of her eyes. Mom, I said gently, I love you, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep coming here and being made to feel ashamed of my life. You're not being made to feel ashamed, my father said, but his voice was different now, quieter. The presence of my security team had changed the dynamic in the room, and he was clearly struggling to process what that meant. Really? I asked. Because 5 minutes ago you were telling our guests that I was spoiled and ungrateful, and that my work doesn't count as real work. You were yelling at me for being successful. You were trying to humiliate me in front of family. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He was looking back and forth between me and my security team, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was starting to understand that the child he'd been trying to put in their place was no longer a child, and that the life he'd been dismissing was more complex and significant than he'd realized. We should go, Marcus said quietly. Let everyone cool down. I nodded and started toward the door, but then I stopped and turned back to my father. You know what the saddest part of all this is? I said. I came here tonight hoping to share good news with my family. We just got approved for a grant to provide free technology training to underserved communities. We're going to help people learn skills that could change their lives. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd be proud of that. I thought maybe you'd see that the work I do actually matters. His face went pale, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the father I remembered from childhood. The one who used to beam with pride when I brought home good grades or won a school competition. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the stubborn man who couldn't admit he might have been wrong. I still don't understand why you need bodyguards, he said weakly. Because sometimes people don't like change, I replied. Sometimes people feel threatened by new technology, by progress, by success they don't understand. Sometimes they lash out at the people who represent those changes. The implication hung in the air. My father's face went red again, but this time it was embarrassment rather than anger. He understood what I was saying, and he understood that he'd become one of those people who felt threatened by success they didn't understand. My mother stood up from the table and walked over to me. I'm proud of you, she said, her voice thick with tears. I'm proud of what you've built, and I'm proud of the person you've become. I'm sorry if we haven't said that enough.